What's up everyone, Dan Munro here, confidence coach, coming back at you with another Ask Dan Anything session. Today we have a question from two of the BROJO members, Yuan and Tahir, and they're asking about business relationships. I can't remember the exact wording of the question, but something along the lines of how do you maintain a business relationship, an agreement with someone. For example, if you hire a lawyer or a contractor and you have an agreement, a promise about what will be delivered, and it doesn't get met, what do you do about that? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, and there's a few principles I want to talk to. The first one, and the most important one I think in my opinion, is to hold on to the idea that you cannot guarantee anything. No amount of contracts or lawsuit threats or anything in the world will guarantee somebody behaves the way you expect them to and want them to. You know, a great case in point is that you can make something punishable by the death penalty and yet people still do it. And they still do it in a way where they're going to easily get caught. So there's a bit around criminal psychology that I'll talk about here today. But the main thing is to understand that when you go into a contract, anybody breaking that contract, it doesn't go against nature to do this. And if you're upset by that, it's because you had the expectation that it wouldn't happen, not because it actually happened. So that's just kind of like an overall philosophical approach to begin with, is to understand that you enter into any agreement with someone, no matter how strong that agreement is, they can change their mind and break it, and this does and will happen. Okay? So rather than trying to go into an agreement thinking, how do I control this perfectly to make sure that it can't be broken, go into it knowing that it can be. That even somebody who's your best friend or highly recommended or got great reviews or whatever, that person can still fuck you over, and it will happen. The reason I go on about this, the first point, is because I think a lot of people expend a lot of time and energy trying to control business relationships like this, trying to control somebody else's behavior, and they're wasting their time because you could spend that energy in such a better way. Now, there are two aspects to actually maintaining the relationship that I will talk about. The first one, of course, is a contractual agreement. Contracts do help statistically, but they don't guarantee shit. What I think is a much better way is a continual retesting of the person's reliability, loyalty, and consistency. So rather than having one big contract for a job, or actually what I'd say is you can have one big contract for a job, but break it down into milestones where you regularly stop and check in to see how everyone's behaving. Kind of like project management. For example, I'm working with a guy at the moment who's redesigning my website in exchange for coaching. Now what we're doing is we've set these milestones where when certain phases of this contractual agreement are done, we check in to see if we're both still happy with it. These phases are essentially exit points. We've both designed these milestones so that either of us could leave at this point and continue on with our lives basically unaffected. Whereas if you need the whole big contract to be completed or you're fucked, then you're leaving yourself open for this. So let's say we've got this in 4 phases. At the end of the phase 1, he's done his bit, I've done my bit, and we check in to see if we're happy with those bits that have been done. And if we are, then we feel a lot more confidence moving into phase 2. But even if we do feel confidence moving into phase 2, we know at the end of phase 2 we're going to check in again. So one of the things you can do is when you're designing contractual agreements with people is to make sure it's split into exit points so that you don't get too deep into it without being able to bail. So that if someone's behavior is going off track from the contract, you can end it. That's one thing. I think what's even more important than this is choosing who you work with carefully. And the way to do that is to make it so that you only work with people that you don't need a contract with. It's really hard to do at first, but finding people where, through testing their behavior, like in a phased form, like I talked about before, you can get to the point where a contract doesn't actually add any value to the relationship. That the person's either going to live up to your expectations or they're not, and a contract's not really going to help you with that. I've had people that have signed up to coaching with me for a long-term agreement and then bailed on it. And that's the next point. What happens when somebody breaches your contract? I could expend my energy into trying to get them to live up to the end of the bargain. But when I look at how this affects my business, what I can clearly see is that my time and energy is so much better spent on trying to find a new person to work with. a better fit, to learn from this experience and move on. There are a lot of people that spend like years of their life trying to get vengeance on a failed contract, suing, trying to get more money out of the person, whatever. And yet, if they could just accept that this thing fell apart and pay the cost of that and move on to finding someone better, in the longer term it would cost them less. So what I really recommend, if I'm going to sort of sum up my rant here, my directionless rant, start off by understanding that someone will fuck you over eventually, and rather than trying to stop that from happening, design a life that adapts to that well, right? That you can pivot from that into a new direction easily. Second thing is, rather than having a big long-term contract, have a range of tiny small-term contracts so that you can bail out on anything that's going off track without having to really hold someone else to account. And thirdly, choose who you want to work with a careful screening process that gives you trust and faith that you can follow through on a contract with them. So rather than needing if you feel that you need a contract to get the job done, you're working with the wrong person. Now I hope that helps. Now I know that will go counter to a lot of advice you'll get around protecting yourself legally and so on and so forth. But I can safely say, just from my own personal experience, I don't really protect myself legally with contracts and things like that. People either do what they say they're going to do or they don't, and I move on quickly and leave them to have whatever life they want. I don't try to seek vengeance on somebody who's done me over. I don't want to make them pay because it's a waste of my time and energy and just brings more negativity in my world. I assume karma will take care of them, or it won't. Who gives a fuck? Let them have their life. Let them fuck people over if they want. Your time could be better spent finding someone good to work with rather than trying to write them a shitty review or talk them down to other people. Look, I hope that helps. If you've got more questions, send them through dan@brojo.co.nz. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll see you guys next time.